Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The International Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, says the government must have the right to decide when to leave any Brexit customs arrangement that might be put in place to avoid border checks between Northern Ireland and Ireland. The so-called backstop would come into force if the UK can't agree a future trade deal with the EU. But both sides have a different view of how and when the UK should be able to leave the backstop. Our political correspondent Vicky Young reports.
A deal is almost done, and cabinet ministers want to know exactly what they'll be asked to sign up to. They've come to read details of progress so far. It's 95% done, according to the Prime Minister, but the remaining 5% is proving difficult. Some are worried the UK will be closely tied to the EU for years, unable to break away.
We have an instruction from our voters to leave the European Union. That decision can't be subcontracted to somebody else. That needs to be an issue for a sovereign British government to be able to determine.
And this is the sticking point. Both sides are committed to making sure there are no border checks between Northern Ireland and Ireland. One option, known as the backstop, is for the UK to stay in a customs arrangement with the EU until a free trade deal is ready. In Paris today, the Foreign Secretary went public with his concerns.
We cannot, as a sovereign country, be trapped in legal arrangements relating to customs, for example, that could exist in perpetuity, even if it was against the sovereign will of the British people at some stage in the future.
The row over this slightly complicated technical issue mirrors a broader complaint from many Brexiteers about Theresa May's plans. For them, Brexit is all about the UK seizing control of its own destiny, not following EU rules for years, with no say over them and no obvious way to escape them. Getting the trading relationship right after Brexit is crucial. Brexiteers have been accused of glossing over the importance of the existing trading routes with the continent. Even the Brexit secretary, who's dealing with all of this, admitted he'd underestimated it.
We want a bespoke arrangement on goods which recognises the peculiar, frankly, geographic economic entity that is the United Kingdom. We are, and I hadn't quite understood the full extent of this, but if you look at the UK and you look at how we trade in goods, we're particularly reliant on the Dover-Calais crossing.
Hello, I'm just on the phone, I'm afraid.
But before trade talks can start, ministers need to finalise the withdrawal agreement.
It's an excellent document. We should be really proud of what the Prime Minister's achieved to get this far, and I'm looking forward to supporting the final deal.
And no one knows how long that will take. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
Now, the race is on to see if a Brexit deal can be signed off at a special summit of EU leaders later this month. For that to happen, negotiators need a breakthrough, especially on the Irish border issue. European Council President Donald Tusk has warned it's likely to be the beginning of next week before enough progress has been made. So how do European politicians think Brexit is going to take shape? To find out, our political editor Gary Gibbon has been to Helsinki, where Europe's centre-right leaders have been getting together.
Finland waited 2 decades after Britain before going into the EU, but it isn't turning back. The EU's right-of-centre parties came here for their annual get-together. The European Union's establishment, still running most of the institutions, but under threat from the rise of populist nationalist parties, and having to handle one big member state on the way out, and keen to seal the terms of departure within days.
Actually, in a bit of a hurry on Brexit.
I think everything is in a proper order, you know, I think.
Maybe within a week the deal could be struck?
I hope so. I am ready to organise our extraordinary summit, if needed, of course. But we need maybe 5, maybe 6, maybe 7 days.
So could Britain be looking at an agreement on exit terms as soon as next week?
We need more time to work. We need more time. Taoiseach, are we close to a deal on Brexit, do you think?
Not quite yet, but I think we are making some progress.
Within a week? Pushing it, you think?
Longer than that, the Irish Prime Minister said, upping the pressure or actually digging in. Some here worry that they could be rushed into giving the UK the temporary customs arrangement it wants if there's no new trade agreement ready when the transition ends. in 2 years' time.
Do you think Brexit could be solved quite quickly?
No.
I don't think it will be a quick solution.
Trebam mnogo da se misli.
We have to think a lot, and we have to think it through.
Round here, they argue Britain's brought these problems on itself by not having a clear view of where it wants the relationship to go after Brexit. So it'll have to agree that a temporary customs arrangement can only end by mutual agreement. Can I just ask you briefly, the temporary customs arrangement, could Britain get out of it whenever it likes?
That's not possible. You cannot make an insurance, one part of the insurance can go out anytime it wants.
So you can't be sure it's temporary?
No, it's only temporary if both parties agree.
You can understand why some British Brexiteers are worried they're getting stuck in something they tried to get out of.
Look, if you find a proper agreement, then this thing will never work, will never be needed. It's an insurance, like a fire insurance. If there's no fire, we have the firewall, then you do not need it anymore.
Is this a party congress or a pop concert?
Look, if the British Prime Minister sings to ABBA, then we can make such a music.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our tireless EU Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier.
His message today: wherever you live in Europe, you face challenges from figures like the former UKIP leader.
There is no Farage in every country. In every country.
But their attention was drifting off, perhaps gripped by the big event for those staying in the EU. A contest to succeed Jean-Claude Juncker as Commission President between the former Prime Minister of Finland
and I live in Luxembourg.
And the man who leads this party grouping in the European Parliament. He said voters in next year's European Parliament elections need to see evidence Britain lost out from Brexit.
If we don't show the difference between being member of the European Union and being outside of the European Union, that would have a huge impact in the election campaign.
He won 80-20. Like many, he proclaimed his mission to combat the populists, though they do have a pretty prominent one in their own political club.
Sorry?
Do you always feel welcome at this gathering?
Of course, we are the most successful party of the EPP.
The European Union doesn't want to offer Britain the perk of customs-free access to its own markets if the intention is to diverge dramatically from EU rules after Brexit and undercut EU companies' costs. So many want guarantees about future British behaviour, and those could be hard for Theresa May to get past her cabinet. The lifebelt of the temporary customs arrangement is proving difficult to get off the wall and throw into the water. And time, like the Scandinavian daylight hours, is short. Gary Goodman, Channel 4 News, Helsinki.
Now, the European Court of Justice will consider whether there's a legal case to determine if British MPs could vote to cancel Brexit. Scotland's highest civil court has ruled. A cross-party group of Scottish MPs want to know if the UK can revoke Article 50 unilaterally without the permission of other EU member states. The British government had wanted to block the case from going forward, but it will now be heard in Luxembourg later this month.
Brexit now, yes. It's that time of night, and 4 months into the job of Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab now says he knows how important cross-channel trade is to the UK economy. So that's all right then. He said today he didn't realise how much we rely on the port of Dover. Our political correspondent Libby Wiener is here with the unenviable task of making sense of this. Slightly gobsmacking to have a Brexit Secretary admitting that he wasn't quite sure how much we relied on this.
Well, when Dominic Raab took over as Brexit Secretary back in the summer, he was seen as a fresh face, a man with a background in law who therefore had an eye for detail. But there's one detail that does seem to have only dawned on him quite recently. And yes, it is a bit gobsmacking. That is just how close Britain is to France and how dependent we are on that trade link between Dover and Calais. Now, I have to say, the last 4 months he has been planning for a no-deal scenario for Brexit, and perhaps that has helped illuminate the problem for him. He's seen just how many lorries come in on those roll-on, roll-off ferries, just how many come through the Channel Tunnel. And I think that is perhaps why he said this to a technology summit about the problem.
We want a bespoke arrangement on goods which recognises the peculiar, frankly, geographic economic entity that is the United Kingdom. We are, and I hadn't quite understood the full extent of this, but if you look at the UK and you look at how we trade in goods, we're particularly reliant on the Dover-Calais crossing.
He went on to say that it wasn't so much shortages as the fact that prices might rise in the shops and consumers needed to be aware of that. Well, that's hardly an election-winning slogan, is it? Government promises to raise the cost of living. So I think that it has dawned on many members of the Cabinet, including the Brexit Secretary, that the idea of no deal really won't wash. There are going to be huge problems if they go down that road, and I think that has increased the pressure for a deal. The Prime Minister is in Brussels tonight. She's had dinner with the Danish Prime Minister, the Dutch Prime Minister and Michel Barnier. She meets President Macron tomorrow. I think there is a sign that things are hotting up, that a deal is in sight.
OK, let's hope so. It's not supercharging our confidence, but let's see. Libby, thank you very much indeed.